When my son shouted those words, "Get out of my house or I'll put you in a nursing home," something inside me didn't break. It just went quiet, like when you turn off a radio that's been playing the same song for too long. I stood there, staring at the boy I once carried through thunderstorms and sleepless nights, and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. But that moment, that outburst, didn't come out of nowhere. No, pain like that brews slow. It hides under Sunday dinners and polite smiles. It starts years earlier, in the way a mother forgives too much and a son learns he can take her love for granted. My name is Evelyn Davis. I'm 58 years old, born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. Retired now. I used to teach literature at Jefferson High. My students called me Miss D, even when I told them to use my first name. I've spent most of my life teaching other people's children about morals, choices, consequences. But somehow I couldn't teach my own son what love with respect really means. Marcus was my miracle baby. I had him when I was 32, after years of doctors telling me it might never happen. His father, Clarence, wasn't around for long. He was a kind man, but weak, the type who loved easily and ran quicker. When Marcus was just 2, Clarence packed a single duffel bag and said he needed space to find himself. We never saw him again. From then on, it was just me and my boy against the world. I worked 2 jobs, teaching by day, tutoring by night. Some days I came home so tired my bones hurt, but the moment Marcus ran to hug me, everything softened. We didn't have much, but our little world was safe, full of bedtime stories and grilled cheese dinners. When Marcus graduated high school, I cried harder than I did at my own mother's funeral. He was the first in our family to get into college. I remember standing outside his dorm, pretending not to cry while he hugged me goodbye. He turned back before going inside, grinning wide. "Don't worry, Mama. I'm going to make you proud." He did. For a while. He studied business, got good grades, started working for a tech company after graduation. He'd call me every weekend, ask for my sweet potato pie recipe, tell me about his new apartment. Those calls, they were everything. But somewhere along the line, something changed. It started small. Missed calls, short texts, the kind of silences that last too long to be innocent. And then one Thanksgiving he brought her, Tanya, beautiful, polished, and cold as a church floor in winter. She shook my hand like it was a business deal, smiled too wide for the camera, and called me Evelyn instead of Mrs. Davis. Right then, I knew she was the type who valued appearances more than people. I tried to like her. God knows I did. I asked about her work, her family, her dreams. She gave me one-word answers and changed the topic to the wine. Marcus adored her. He looked at her like she was the sun, and he'd just discovered daylight. I didn't want to ruin that. I wanted my son to be happy. After they married, they bought a big house in Atlanta. 3 stories, marble countertops, a backyard that looked like something out of a magazine. Marcus said, "Mama, I want you to come stay with us for a while. There's plenty of room, I should have known." Plenty of room was the first lie. When I arrived, Tanya was all polite smiles again. "Of course you'll be comfortable here," she said, walking me down to the basement. It was clean, sure, but there were no windows. The air was cold. She'd already set up a small cot, a nightstand, and an old TV that only played static. I laughed it off at first. "Feels like I'm back in my college dorm." She smiled that tight, practiced smile. Exactly. That night, I unpacked my suitcase and sat on the edge of the cot, listening to them laughing upstairs. Something about the sound felt strange, distant, exclusive, like I'd become a guest in my own family. Over the next few weeks, Tanya began adjusting things. She changed the locks on the upstairs fridge, said it was because of security since their cleaning lady had access. She labeled the pantry shelves, our groceries, and guest groceries. My shelf had oatmeal, canned beans, and rice. Marcus didn't notice, or maybe he chose not to. Then came the whispers. I'd hear them arguing late at night, Tanya calling me a leech, saying I was too dependent. Marcus's voice, once so soft with me, turned defensive. "She's my mother," he'd say, but weaker each time. The day I overheard her say, "Once she's out, that deed will finally be clean." My hands shook so bad, I nearly dropped the laundry basket. I didn't know what she meant, not yet, but I knew it wasn't good. Still, I stayed quiet. Because that's what mothers do. We tell ourselves it's just a phase. We tell ourselves love can fix anything. We convince ourselves our children couldn't possibly betray us. But love doesn't stop the knife from being sharp. It just makes you hold it closer when it cuts. That night, lying in that cold basement, I stared at the ceiling and prayed for strength. Not the kind that fights, but the kind that watches and remembers. Because I could feel it coming. That final moment when the little boy I raised would become a stranger I'd have to survive. And when that day arrived, I'd be ready. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that evil doesn't always stomp through the door wearing red heels. Sometimes it walks in smiling, carrying a casserole dish and saying, "Let me help." That was Tanya. In the beginning, she played her role perfectly. She'd bring me tea in the mornings, ask about my health, compliment my cooking. "Evelyn," she'd say, "you make the best cornbread." I could never compete with that. I smiled, flattered. But even then, I noticed how her compliments were like sugar on glass. Sweet on top, sharp underneath. She started making little jokes about my age. "You still drive, right? Wow, that's brave." Or, "You're on Facebook? That's adorable." Marcus laughed every time. He thought she was being playful. I knew better. I'd seen that kind of woman before, women who needed to dim someone else's light to feel their own shine. Still, I stayed gracious. I cooked Sunday dinners, cleaned the kitchen, watched their dog when they traveled. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd move out soon, find a little place of my own. But then, Tanya said something that made me realize this woman wasn't joking. She had a plan. One morning I came upstairs to make coffee. She was already there, sitting at the counter, scrolling through her phone. "Evelyn," she said without looking up, "Marcus and I were talking. We think you'd be more comfortable downstairs full time. You know, with your own little kitchenette and everything. More independence." I just stared at her. "I already live downstairs." She smiled, that same empty smile. "Yes, but we mean permanently. We could even install a door at the top of the stairs so you'll have privacy." Privacy. That's what she called it. I knew what she meant. Separation. Distance. Out of sight. Out of mind. When Marcus got home that night, I brought it up. He rubbed his temples and said, "Mama, she's just trying to make things better for everyone." "You'd still be part of the house." I swallowed hard. "You mean I'd still be under the house?" He frowned. "You're taking it the wrong way." I wanted to scream, "The wrong way?" But I didn't. I just nodded, because I was starting to see something frightening. My son didn't think for himself anymore. Tanya's voice had replaced his. From that day, things shifted fast. She stopped pretending. I'd wake up to find my things moved, my favorite mug missing, my sweaters donated by accident. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found her going through my purse. She didn't even flinch. "Just making sure you didn't misplace your checkbook again," she said sweetly. I hadn't. A week later, I received a call from the electric company asking about the billing change. Someone had switched the account name from mine to Tanya's. I mentioned it to Marcus, and he brushed it off, said Tanya was just organizing. I started to feel like a ghost in that house. My pictures disappeared from the hallway. The family portraits I'd framed were replaced by new ones. Marcus and Tanya on vacations, at business events, standing in front of the house that used to feel like mine. And through it all, she never once raised her voice. That's what made her dangerous. She didn't fight me. She erased me. But the breaking point came 2 months later. It was a Saturday evening. Marcus was grilling outside. Tanya was sipping wine on the patio. I stepped out to bring them a plate of cornbread. Tanya looked up from her glass and said, "Oh, Evelyn, you don't have to serve us." "You can relax," Marcus laughed. "Yeah, Mama, let Tanya handle it." Something in his tone stung. He didn't call me Mama with love anymore. It sounded like a word he'd outgrown. I turned to go back inside, and that's when I heard it. Tanya's voice, low but clear enough. "Once she's out, that deed will finally be clean." I froze. Marcus didn't answer, but he didn't correct her either. He just said, "We'll handle it soon." My stomach dropped. The deed? What did she mean? I'd co-signed this house years ago when Marcus couldn't afford the mortgage on his own. My name had always been on that document. Always. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out my folder of papers, the ones I'd kept in an old biscuit tin, and checked the deed copy. My name was right there, bold as daylight. So why did she say clean? A few days later, when the mail came, Tanya grabbed it before I could. She did that often, said it was to save me the walk. But that day, something told me to wait until she left for her yoga class. When the door closed, I went through the stack she'd left on the counter, bills, catalogs, and then an envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize. Addressed to me, but unopened. I opened it. Inside was a notice, transfer of property ownership under review. It listed the address of our home and referenced new documentation recently submitted, without my signature. My hands started to shake so bad I had to sit down. The paper slipped to the floor. I stared at it, trying to breathe. Tanya wasn't just cruel. She was calculating. By the time I heard the garage door open, I'd hidden the letter under my sweater. She came in, smiling. "Dinner in 30, Evelyn? Hope you're hungry," I smiled back. "I'm starving." That night, I sat at the table with them, calm and polite, pretending nothing had changed. But in my chest, something cold and heavy settled. Realization. My son's wife was trying to steal my home, and my son was letting her. The courthouse clerk barely looked up when I handed her the paper. She just adjusted her glasses, typed a few things, and said, "Name on the property?" "Evelyn Davis," she frowned. "Address?" I told her. She clicked again, her nails tapping the keys like a ticking clock. Then she stopped, squinted at the screen, and looked at me. Really looked. "Ma'am, according to our system, this property is now listed under Marcus and Tanya Davis only." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. "What?" She turned the monitor so I could see. My name, gone. Just gone, like it had never existed. The transfer date was 2 weeks ago. The room felt like it tilted. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "Are you sure?" I whispered. She nodded. "Looks like it was notarized electronically. Everything appears legitimate." I didn't say anything else. I just thanked her, walked back to my car, and sat there with my hands gripping the steering wheel until the edges of the paper dug into my palm. Someone had stolen my home. And not just someone. My own son and his wife. I drove back in silence. When I pulled into the driveway, Tanya was outside, watering her rose bushes like the world was perfect. She waved. "Everything okay, Evelyn?" I forced a smile. "Just running errands." I could feel the lie burn in my throat, but I said nothing more. Not yet. Inside, I went straight downstairs, locked my door, and spread the documents out on the bed. I studied every signature, every stamp. The notarization had my name on it, but I hadn't signed anything, not once. My handwriting was precise, looped from years of grading essays. The signature on that deed was tight, messy, like someone trying to copy me under pressure. Tanya. My son's wife had forged my name. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those pages. I just remember my chest tightening until I could barely breathe. A mother's love has limits. Not because it runs out, but because betrayal cuts deeper when it comes from your own blood. That night, I cooked dinner like usual. Roast chicken, collard greens, and mashed potatoes. Marcus's favorite. I smiled through it. Tanya bragged about a new spa opening downtown, and Marcus talked about promotions at work. They looked so normal, so content, like they hadn't just robbed the woman who raised him. I studied Marcus's face. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Somewhere deep down, he knew. Maybe he didn't do it himself, but he allowed it. He let her guide his hand. After dinner, when Tanya went upstairs, I asked him quietly, "Marcus, did you change the deed?" He froze mid-step. "What are you talking about?" "I went to the courthouse today." He sighed, rubbed his neck. "Look, Mama, Tanya just thought it'd be easier if the paperwork reflected—" "Reflected what?" I interrupted. "That I don't exist?" He dropped his hand. "You're overreacting. Overreacting." That word hit me harder than any insult. I stared at him, searching for the boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who used to cry when he scraped his knee. All I saw was a man too proud to admit he'd become a stranger to his own conscience. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to shake him and scream, "You're my son!" But instead, I just said, "One day, you'll look at yourself and realize you traded love for convenience." He didn't answer. He just walked away. After that, things in the house changed. Slowly, cruelly. Tanya started locking doors upstairs. She called a contractor to install a private entrance for me, meaning I'd have to use the side door from now on. When I asked about it, she said, "You'll have more independence this way." Independence. Another pretty word used to disguise control. Soon after, she hired a maid, a young girl named Carla, to help me with chores. But really, Carla was there to watch me. Every time I moved around the house, Tanya's voice followed. "Carla, make sure Evelyn doesn't overexert herself." One afternoon, I caught Tanya whispering to Carla in the hallway, "Don't let her upstairs unless I say so. She tends to forget things. She was planting seeds, painting me as confused, forgetful, unstable, the perfect setup for what she planned next. Then came the medication trick. Tanya started giving me new vitamins, saying, "These are good for bone density." But one night, I looked up the name online. They were sleep aids. Strong ones. She was trying to make me groggy, compliant. I stopped taking them, of course. I poured them down the sink, but I kept the empty bottles. I knew I'd need proof someday. That proof came sooner than I expected. One evening, I went upstairs quietly when they were out to dinner. I checked the desk in Marcus's office, the one he said was off limits. Inside a drawer, I found a stack of documents, bills, bank transfers. One caught my eye. A wire sent from our joint account to Tanya's personal account for $20,000. At the bottom was a note in her handwriting, "For legal prep, legal prep." That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat by the small window in the basement, staring at the sky, realizing how far I'd fallen in my own house. They had taken everything, my home, my dignity, my peace. But here's the thing about people like Tanya. They mistake silence for weakness. They think a quiet woman is a powerless one. They never realize that silence can be the sound of planning, and that's what I began to do. Because if they thought they could erase me, they were about to learn that some roots go deeper than any deed. The day everything came crashing down started like any other. Tanya's voice floated through the kitchen, sharp and sugary, reminding me that her parents were coming for dinner. "Evelyn, could you make your famous mac and cheese tonight? My father just adores traditional food. Traditional." I almost laughed. That woman couldn't say soul food without twisting it into something polite. Still, I agreed. I always did. I cooked not for them, but for the part of me that still clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, Marcus would look up from his phone one day and remember who raised him. By the time evening came, the house smelled of baked chicken, buttered rolls, and cinnamon pie. The table gleamed. Tanya's parents arrived right on cue, her mother in pearls, her father with that permanent look of mild disgust, like he'd stepped into a place beneath him. They gave me thin smiles and compliments that sounded more like rehearsed lines than kindness. "Such a lovely home," her mother said, scanning the place as though checking for dust. "Thank you," I replied, forcing warmth into my voice. "I did a lot of the decorating myself," Tanya cut in before I could breathe. "Oh, we changed so much since then, Evelyn. You should see the upstairs, modern now." Her words sliced through the air with practiced precision. Marcus chuckled like he hadn't just heard his mother being dismissed in her own home. We sat down to eat, the clinking of silverware filling the silence. I barely spoke. I just watched Tanya touch Marcus's arm every few minutes, whisper in his ear like she owned every thought he had. Watched her parents exchange smug glances every time Marcus agreed with her. Halfway through dinner, Tanya's father leaned back in his chair and said, "So, Marcus, have you made progress on that title transfer? I told you it's important to have everything under your control before the market shifts." My fork froze mid-air. Marcus glanced at me, just for a second, and that flicker of guilt in his eyes told me everything. They'd already done it. Tanya smiled sweetly. "Oh, it's all set, Daddy. Marcus took care of it weeks ago." Her father nodded, satisfied. Her mother sipped her wine, and me? I sat there, staring at the chicken on my plate that suddenly tasted like ash. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was humiliation. They hadn't just taken my house. They were sitting in it, laughing about it, while I served them dinner. I don't remember standing up. I just remember the sound of my chair scraping against the floor. Everyone went quiet. I set my napkin on the table and said softly, "Marcus, could I have a word with you?" Tanya smirked. "Oh, anything you have to say, you can say in front of everyone." That was her mistake. I looked right at her. "You forged my signature, Tanya. I saw the documents. And you," I turned to Marcus, "you let her." He blinked, startled that I dared to say it out loud. "Mama, please, don't you mama me," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "You let this woman steal my home, my name, my peace," her father scoffed. Now, there's no need for dramatics." "Dramatics?" I turned to him. "Sir, you're sitting in a house I paid for with 20 years of sweat and lesson plans, and you have the nerve to call me dramatic?" The table went dead silent. Tanya's smile twitched. Marcus stood up, trying to control the situation like a boss at a meeting. "This isn't the time, Mama." I took a deep breath, my chest tightening. "Then when is the time, Marcus? After you throw me out? After you lock that door and tell people your mother moved away?" He slammed his palm on the table. The dishes rattled. "Enough! You're making a scene! If you can't respect us in this house, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." His voice was sharp, unfamiliar. Tanya's eyes glowed with triumph. I stared at my son, my baby, and saw a stranger wearing his face. "You really believe that, don't you?" I whispered. He glared back. "You heard me. Get out of my house, or I'll put you in a nursing home." The room froze. Even Tanya's parents looked uneasy now. But me? I didn't flinch. Not a tear, not a tremor. I just felt something inside me click. A quiet, cold finality. The kind that comes when the heart finally gives up on hope. I nodded slowly, took off my apron, and folded it neatly on the chair. "All right, Marcus," he frowned. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving." Tanya blinked, caught off guard. "Just like that?" I smiled. "Just like that." I went downstairs, pulled out my old suitcase, and began to pack. Clothes, Bible, family photos. One by one, I placed them inside, not with sadness, but with purpose. Because while they thought they'd taken everything from me, they didn't know who they were dealing with. When I zipped that suitcase shut, I felt lighter than I had in years. Upstairs, I could hear them whispering. Tanya's laughter mixing with Marcus's frustration. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally buried me under her designer heels. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd made one phone call earlier that evening to a man named Henry Coleman, a man who owed me more than money. A man who once said, "If you ever need anything, Evelyn, anything at all, you call me first." And now, it was time to collect. So while Marcus and Tanya congratulated themselves upstairs, I wheeled my suitcase to the front door. Then, right on cue, headlights washed across the driveway. A sleek black limousine eased up to the curb, engine humming low. Marcus's laughter stopped. Tanya went to the window. "What the hell?" she muttered. Marcus's grin faltered as a tall man in a tailored suit stepped out, adjusting his coat before glancing toward the house. And when he saw me, he smiled. The door opened with that quiet, expensive click only luxury cars make. And out stepped Henry Coleman, taller than I remembered, his silver hair now peppered with white. He looked every bit the powerful attorney he'd become, but when his eyes met mine, that old warmth returned, the kind that says, "I remember what you did for me, Mrs. Davis," he said, offering his hand like I was royalty. "It's been a long time." I smiled, calm and steady. 15 years, Henry, but who's counting? Behind me, the front door opened. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his face a mix of confusion and disbelief. Tanya appeared beside him, one manicured hand gripping the frame. "Mom?" Marcus said, his voice uncertain now. "What's going on? Who is this?" Henry turned to him, his tone polite but firm. "I believe you're Marcus Davis. I'm Henry Coleman, representing Mrs. Evelyn Davis, sole trustee and beneficiary of the Davis family estate." Tanya blinked. "Excuse me, estate?" Henry smiled thinly, reaching into his briefcase. "Yes, this property and 3 others to be exact. Though I understand there's been some confusion about ownership." Marcus frowned, his confidence faltering. "This is our house. We live here. My wife and I—" Henry cut him off gently. "Correction. You reside here. Temporarily. Mrs. Davis, however, owns it outright." The silence that followed was glorious. I didn't have to say a word. Tanya's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at Marcus, waiting for him to fix it, but all he could manage was a stunned, "That can't be right." Henry opened his leather folder and handed over a stack of neatly organized documents. "Here are the updated trust papers, the original deed, and the last notarized copy. The authentic one, not the forgery you filed 2 weeks ago." Tanya's face drained of color. Marcus's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. His voice cracked. "Mama, I raised my hand." "Don't, Marcus." "Not yet." Henry adjusted his glasses and continued, addressing Tanya directly now. "Mrs. Tanya Davis, you are hereby advised that the act of falsifying or altering ownership documents constitutes felony forgery under Georgia state law. I've already submitted evidence to the district attorney's office." She took a step back. You can't prove anything." Henry's smile was professional, almost amused. "We can, actually. Your handwriting analysis matches, and the notary in question has already given a statement. You'll receive formal notice within the week." Tanya's composure cracked. Her voice trembled as she turned to Marcus. "You said it was safe. You said she'd never find out." Marcus stammered. I thought she wasn't supposed to. That was enough for me." I stepped forward, suitcase still by my side. My voice was soft, but it carried more weight than his shouting ever could. "You thought wrong, baby. You thought your mama was too old, too tired, too blind to see what you were doing. But you forgot who raised you. I taught you to read every line of fine print before you signed your name." His eyes dropped to the ground. "I taught you integrity," I continued, my tone steady. "I taught you how to stand tall. I gave you everything I had, and you traded it for her approval," Tanya snapped, her mask gone. "Don't you dare blame me for your mistakes, old woman. You were living here for free, eating our food, sitting in our house." I turned to her slowly. "My house, my food. My patience," Henry cleared his throat. "Legally speaking, Mrs. Davis is correct. The look Tanya gave me could have set the world on fire." "This isn't over," she hissed. "Oh, honey," I said, picking up my suitcase. "For you, it's just beginning." I turned to Henry. "Would you mind showing me to the car?" He smiled, opening the limousine door. "Of course, Mrs. Davis." I walked down the driveway, the cool evening air brushing against my skin like freedom. Behind me, I could hear Marcus calling my name, his voice trembling. But I didn't stop. I didn't even turn around. Henry waited until I was settled in the back seat before he spoke again. "They really forged your name?" "They did," I said. "But that's not the part that hurts." He nodded knowingly. "It's the betrayal." "Yes," I whispered. "And the silence before it. That's what cuts deepest." The car started moving, rolling slowly down the street. I looked out the tinted window at the house. My house, where I'd spent so many years praying for peace. And I realized something I never wanted to admit. Peace doesn't come from holding on. It comes from letting go. Henry handed me an envelope. "The trust is secure now. You still own everything." We also uncovered their financial transfers. About $75,000 siphoned into her personal accounts over the past 6 months. "Do you want to press charges?" I thought about it. About the jail cell Tanya deserved. About Marcus sitting in a courtroom, humiliated and broken. Then I shook my head. "Not yet. Let them sit in fear for a while. That's a better teacher than prison." He chuckled softly. "Still the same Evelyn." As we turned the corner, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. The weight lifted, not completely, but enough to breathe again. Henry glanced over. "You could stay at one of your properties tonight. The one in Brookhaven is ready, fully furnished," I smiled. "Take me there," he nodded. "Consider it done." And as the limousine glided through the city lights, I closed my eyes and whispered a small prayer. Not for revenge, not for justice, for strength, because I knew this wasn't the end. Tanya wasn't the kind of woman who accepted defeat quietly. And Marcus, my poor lost boy, he was about to learn that when a mother walks away, she doesn't leave empty-handed. She takes her silence and turns it into power. The world has a way of underestimating quiet women, the kind who keep their heads down, their voices low, their prayers steady. But what most people don't realize is, quiet women see everything. When I was younger, I worked as a private caregiver for a woman named Mrs. Loretta Holloway. She was 83, frail as lace and rich as sin. I started caring for her right after Clarence left. Marcus was still little then, barely 6. I'd drop him off at school in the mornings, then go to that big, lonely mansion up on Ashland Drive. Mrs. Halloway had no children, no close family. Just old paintings, mahogany furniture, and a mind that drifted in and out of the past. But on her good days, she talked about everything. Her late husband's business, the properties they owned across Georgia, the way people disappeared after the money came in. I have no one left. Evelyn, she told me once, sitting by the window in her silk robe. They all wanted what I had, not who I was. I'd hold her hand and say, "Well, you've got me, ma'am." And I ain't going anywhere. I meant it. For 3 years, I stayed by her side. Through every fall, every fever, every long night of confusion. When she passed away, I cried harder than I expected. She had become more than an employer. She was my friend, my teacher, a mirror of what I could become if I let bitterness win. A month after the funeral, I got a call from her lawyer, Henry Coleman. That was the first time we met. I went to his office expecting a paycheck and a polite thank you. Instead, he handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in her delicate script. Inside was a letter. It said, "You've been the only person to treat me like a human being, not a bank account. Everything I own now belongs to you. Take care of what I built, but more importantly, take care of yourself." I remember sitting there numb, staring at those words while Henry explained the details. She'd left me her house, 3 rental properties, and a savings account big enough to change everything. At first, I didn't believe it. It felt like a test from God. What will you do with this, Evelyn? So I didn't rush to spend it. I didn't tell anyone, not even Marcus. I sold the Halloway mansion, moved some money into investments, and quietly transferred the rest into trusts under my name. I used part of it to buy the house Marcus now claimed as his. I put his name on it, not because I had to, but because I wanted him to have security if something ever happened to me. But now, as I sat in the limousine beside Henry, I realized I'd made a mistake. Not in giving, but in trusting. He glanced at me as the car glided through the quiet Atlanta streets. "You always were the modest kind. Never told anyone what you had," I smiled faintly. Didn't see the point. Money don't change what's in your heart. It just makes people show who they really are. He nodded slowly. "And I take it your daughter-in-law's shown plenty." "Oh, she's shown me everything I need to know," I said. "But I'm not done with her yet." We arrived at my Brookhaven property just before midnight. It wasn't as big as the other house, but it was beautiful in its own right. Soft cream walls, wraparound porch, quiet neighborhood. A place that felt like breathing again. When Henry carried my suitcase inside, I stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. It had been years since I'd slept somewhere that was truly mine. "Would you like me to have the locks changed in the morning?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And have a copy of the new deed printed." "I want to frame it," he chuckled. "Still have that teacher's sense of symbolism, huh?" I smiled. Sometimes lessons need to be visual. After he left, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the porch, watching the moonlight stretch across the lawn. The night was still, but my mind wasn't. I thought about Marcus, about the little boy who used to sneak extra cookies into my purse before work, about the young man who promised to buy me a house one day. Somewhere along the way I'd lost him, or maybe I'd just refused to see who he'd become. But I couldn't give up on him. Not yet. I pulled out my phone and opened my old contacts. There it was, Detective Rosa Lane. We'd met years ago when she investigated a burglary at Mrs. Halloway's estate. I'd helped her piece together clues that led to an arrest. Rosa had said, "If you ever need me, Evelyn, you call." I hit dial. She answered on the second ring. "Evelyn Davis? Lord, I haven't heard that voice in forever. Hi, Rosa. I need a favor." Her tone shifted instantly. "Talk to me." By the time I hung up, she'd promised to discreetly look into Tanya's financials, bank accounts, property deeds, business affiliations. Rosa had a knack for finding the dirt people thought they'd buried deep, and as I sat there sipping my tea, I knew I was done being their victim. They had stolen from me. Lied to me, tried to erase me, but I was done playing small. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman with resources, allies, and a story that could ruin reputations. The next morning, I called Henry again. "I want you to prepare eviction papers. They have 30 days to leave my house." He didn't hesitate. "Consider it done." Then I called the bank, the insurance company, and the HOA board, one by one, taking back every inch of my life they'd tried to claim. By noon, Tanya's access to every account was locked. Her cards declined, her checks bounced, and her phone started ringing with calls she couldn't answer. I didn't need to see her face to imagine it. The panic, the confusion, the dawning realization that the woman she'd called old had just pulled the rug out from under her designer heels. And as I closed my laptop, I whispered the words that Mrs. Halloway had written to me all those years ago. Take care of what I built. But more importantly, take care of yourself. Because now, for the first time in decades, I was about to do exactly that. 3 days after Tanya's access was cut off, I was sitting on my porch, drinking coffee from my favorite chipped mug, when I saw a black sedan pull up. For a second, my chest tightened. I thought she'd sent someone to confront me. But when the door opened, out stepped Henry Coleman, briefcase in hand, wearing that calm expression that meant he had news. He walked up the porch steps and tipped his hat slightly. "Morning, Mrs. Davis. Hope you don't mind a surprise visit." I smiled. "Henry, after what we've been through, I welcome surprises, so long as they come with paperwork." He chuckled. "Well, you'll like this one. I have good news and some expected news." I gestured for him to sit. "Let's start with the expected." He handed me a manila envelope. "The eviction papers have been served. Marcus and Tanya have 30 days to vacate your property. But from what my associate told me, they didn't take it very well." I raised a brow. "I can imagine." "Oh, I think you'd enjoy the scene," he said with a faint grin. Apparently, Tanya tore the notice in half and threw it at the courier. Marcus just stood there, looked like he'd seen a ghost. I took a slow sip of my coffee. He's starting to realize ghosts can hire lawyers. Henry smirked. Now for the good news. The DA's office fast-tracked the investigation into the forged documents. The notary confirmed Tanya offered her cash under the table. "We'll have a court summons ready within the week." I let out a long breath. Not satisfaction, relief. Good. She deserves to answer for what she's done. Henry nodded, then leaned forward. "But Evelyn, before this goes public, I have to ask, are you sure you want this to go all the way? Once charges are filed, it'll be in the papers. Marcus's name will be dragged into it." I looked out toward the yard. The morning light glinted off the fence, catching the wind chimes I'd hung years ago, the same ones Tanya once called old-fashioned. Their soft clinking reminded me of peace, of simpler times. "I'm sure," I said finally. "He made his choices. Maybe the world seeing them will be the only thing that wakes him up." Henry nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." Before he could pack up, a white SUV pulled up across the street. I didn't need to squint to know who it was. Tanya. She stepped out, wearing oversized sunglasses and fury disguised as poise. Marcus climbed out after her, shoulders slumped. They crossed the street together, Tanya's heels clicking against the pavement like gunfire. "Well," Henry murmured, standing. "Looks like round 2 is about to start." Tanya stopped at the bottom of my porch steps. "You've got some nerve, Evelyn," she said, voice low but trembling. "Evicting us from our home? How could you do that to your own son?" I stood calm as a church bell. "My son did that to himself when he let you put my name through the mud." Marcus spoke then, softer than I'd ever heard him. "Mama, please. Can't we just talk?" Henry stepped forward. "Mrs. Davis has nothing further to discuss with you until your attorney is present." Tanya's eyes flashed. "Attorney? Oh, I see how it is. You think you can humiliate us? Well, you're not the only one with lawyers, old woman. My cousin works for a firm in Midtown. He says you won't get a dime after he's through." I smiled faintly. "You're welcome to try, but I'd suggest your cousin read George's property law before embarrassing himself." Henry's tone sharpened. "Mrs. Davis holds full ownership under a trust established before your marriage. Mrs. Tanya Davis. There's no legal standing for any claim you think you have." Tanya took a step forward, pointing at me. "You're pathetic. All this because you couldn't stand losing control over your son." I looked her straight in the eye. "I didn't lose control. I lost faith. And that's worse." She opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. "Tell me, Tanya, how does it feel, watching your cards fall one by one?" Her voice cracked. "You can't ruin us. You'll see. We'll fight this!" I stepped closer, so close I could see the smear of her lipstick trembling at the corners of her mouth. "You already lost." You just haven't accepted it yet. Henry placed a gentle hand on my arm. Evelyn, that's enough. Tanya turned abruptly and stormed back to the car, yanking Marcus by the sleeve. He didn't resist. He just looked back once, eyes full of something between guilt and fear. When the car sped off, Henry sighed. She's dangerous, Evelyn. Vindictive. Don't be surprised if she tries something desperate. I'm counting on it, I said quietly. He looked at me curiously. Counting on it? I smiled thinly. When people like her fall, they panic. And panic makes them sloppy. I don't need to chase her anymore. She's about to destroy herself. Henry shook his head with half a smile. Remind me never to cross you. As he gathered his papers, I walked him to his car. Thank you, Henry, for everything, he nodded. You're not done yet, Evelyn. But you're winning. Just stay safe. After he left, I went back inside. The house felt warm again, like it was mine in spirit as well as on paper. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Tanya wasn't the type to retreat quietly. That evening, as the sun sank low, my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. You think you can take everything from us and walk away? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I smiled and blocked the number, because I did know who I was dealing with. A woman whose power came from manipulation, not truth, and I'd already survived the worst of her lies. What she didn't realize was that I had one last move, something she could never predict, and it was already in motion when I woke the next morning. The house was quiet, but my phone wasn't. 3 missed calls from Detective Rosa Lane, 1 new voicemail, and a text that simply said, "We got her." I called her back before I even brushed my teeth. "Rosa," I said, my voice trembling. "What did you find?" Her tone was steady but heavy. "A whole lot more than we expected, Evelyn. Your daughter-in-law didn't just forge your name. She's been running a small-scale fraud operation using your identity, applying for credit lines, falsifying tax deductions, and transferring funds from the joint account into offshore ones." I sank onto the couch. Offshore? How much? Close to 85,000 so far. But that's not the worst part. I closed my eyes. Go on. She filed for power of attorney under your name 3 months ago, Rosa said. If she'd gotten away with it, she'd have had complete legal control over your finances, medical care, and property. You'd have been locked in a nursing home with nothing left. I didn't speak for a long moment. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from something colder. Resolve. Rosa continued. The DA's office is preparing a warrant. We'll arrest her within the next 48 hours. But Evelyn, when this breaks, it's going to get messy. Marcus's name might come up too. I understand, I said quietly. Do what you have to do. When I hung up, I sat there for a long while, staring at the steam rising from my untouched tea. The world outside was calm, but inside me a storm had settled, one made not of grief anymore, but clarity. That afternoon I dressed carefully, navy slacks, cream blouse, gold earrings, the kind of outfit that said, I'm not broken. I'm prepared. I drove across town to Henry's office, where he greeted me with a tight nod and the day's newspaper in hand. The headline nearly stopped my heart. Elder fraud scandal in North Atlanta suburb. Local couple under investigation. Below the title was a photo. Marcus and Tanya at some charity event, smiling for the cameras. And beneath that, the subheading, Forgery, Theft, and Property Misappropriation, alleged by retired educator Evelyn Davis. Henry folded the paper. It's official. They're on the radar. I exhaled. Then it's begun. He nodded. Tanya's firm is panicking. Her cousin tried to contact the DA to mediate. It didn't work. The DA's team wants this case to set an example. I smiled faintly. Poetic justice. Later that evening, my phone rang again. An unknown number. For a second, I thought it might be another threat. But when I answered, it was Marcus. His voice cracked through the line, small and scared. Mama. They came to the house. I said nothing. "She's been arrested," he whispered. "They took her, right in front of the neighbors. Cameras, lights, everything. She kept screaming your name." I closed my eyes, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Marcus, I told you this would happen." He started to cry. "I didn't know, Mama. I swear I didn't know what she was doing. She told me it was just paperwork, that you wanted us to have more control. Stop!" My tone was firm, motherly, but not cruel. "You did know. Maybe not every detail, but you knew enough. And you chose to look away." He didn't argue, just soft sobs on the other end. "Mama, what do I do now?" I took a deep breath. "You tell the truth. You cooperate with the investigators. And you start by apologizing not to me, but to yourself, for forgetting who you were raised to be." There was silence, then a broken whisper. "I'm sorry." I hung up before I could say it back. Some words aren't meant to be rushed. By morning, the story was everywhere. News vans parked outside their gated neighborhood, neighbors whispering behind manicured hedges. Tanya's mugshot was plastered across every screen, hair disheveled, eyes cold. The internet called her the gold digger of Georgia. Marcus lost his job that same day. The company cited ethical concerns. I read the email he sent me later, desperate, apologetic, confused. He didn't ask for money. He asked for forgiveness, but forgiveness doesn't come before accountability. That night, Henry called. "The DA wants to meet you tomorrow. They're finalizing the charges: elder fraud, identity theft, forgery. They'd also like your statement for the press if you're willing." "I'll do it," I said. "But I won't give them a sob story. I'll give them the truth." He chuckled softly. "That's why they want you, Evelyn. You speak like a woman who doesn't need revenge, just balance." The next morning, I stood in front of a sea of microphones and flashing cameras outside the courthouse. My voice didn't tremble. "I never wanted this," I said, "but I couldn't stay silent while my own son and his wife tried to erase me. Elder abuse isn't always bruises and broken bones. Sometimes it's signatures on papers, whispered lies, and gaslighting that makes you doubt your sanity. I'm not here as a victim. I'm here as proof that you can fight back and win." Applause broke out among the small crowd. I saw women wiping tears, reporters nodding. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. That night, when I got home, the porch light flickered on automatically. I sat down on the swing and watched the moon rise. The air was cool, soft against my skin. It should have felt like victory. But there was still a hollow ache where Marcus's laughter used to live. I whispered into the quiet, "Lord, help him find his way back." And in that silence, I remembered something Mrs. Halloway once said: "Mercy is the most powerful weapon a woman can carry, but you don't unsheath it until they've learned the weight of justice." I finally understood what she meant. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when the knock came. 3 slow, hesitant taps, like the sound of someone testing if they still belong somewhere. I opened the door, and there he was. Marcus. He stood on my porch, soaked through from the rain, his once crisp suit now wrinkled, his eyes hollowed out from sleepless nights. The boy who once ran to me with scraped knees and birthday wishes was gone. In his place stood a man crushed under the weight of his own choices. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. No words, just the sound of rain hitting the roof. "Can I come in?" he finally asked, his voice quiet. I stepped aside. "You can." He walked in slowly, his shoes dripping water onto my clean floor, his eyes darting around as if searching for something familiar. Maybe he was. Maybe he was looking for the version of me that used to forgive everything. But she wasn't here anymore. He sat at the table where I'd laid out 2 mugs of coffee, one black, one with cream and sugar, the way he used to drink it when he was little. I'd made it before he arrived, somehow knowing he would. A mother's instinct never dies, even when trust does. He stared into the cup, then whispered, "They let her out on bail." I didn't answer. She says she's going to fight the charges, says she's innocent. He gave a bitter laugh. You should have seen her, Mama. She still thinks she can talk her way out of this. She can't, I said simply. And deep down, you know that. He nodded slowly. His voice cracked. I thought I was doing the right thing, Mama. She said you were struggling, that you were forgetful, that you wanted us to handle things so you could rest. I believed her. God help me. I believed every word. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the shame written all over his face. Marcus, when a lie feels comfortable, that's when it's most dangerous. You didn't just believe her, you needed to. He flinched. Needed to? You needed to believe you weren't betraying me. You needed to believe love meant never questioning your wife. But love without truth, son, is just obedience wearing perfume. He lowered his head, tears hitting the table. I lost everything, Mama. No, I said gently. You lost what was never yours to keep. Money can be made again. Houses can be rebuilt. But integrity? That's harder. He covered his face with his hands. They're saying I might be charged too. Accessory to fraud. I felt the sting of tears but blinked them away. And will you tell the truth when they ask? Yes, he said. I already did. I gave them everything, every document, every text, every transaction Tanya made. I told them I should have stopped her. Then maybe, I said softly, you're finally learning. We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels like both punishment and peace. Finally, he looked up, his eyes red. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to see you. I reached across the table, my fingers brushing his hand. Forgiveness isn't a switch, Marcus. It's a seed. It grows when the soil's ready, but you have to water it with truth first. He nodded, his lips trembling. I miss you, Mama. I smiled sadly. Then start finding the man I raised, not the one she built. He left a few minutes later, but not before hugging me. It wasn't the kind of hug you give out of habit. It was desperate, clinging, like he was trying to find his way back to something real. When he pulled away, he whispered, I'll make it right, somehow. After he left, I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain fade into quiet. I thought about how strange life was, how betrayal could grow from love, and how sometimes, to save someone, you had to let them drown in their own lessons first. 2 days later, I got another call from Detective Rosa. The DA's office wants Marcus to testify against Tanya, she said. He's hesitant, but it could change everything for him. He'll do it, I said. He's not the same man anymore. And I was right. When the trial began, Marcus took the stand. I was there, sitting in the front row. I watched him tell the truth, not the version Tanya had drilled into him, but the raw, ugly truth. He spoke about her manipulation, the lies, the guilt. Every word cost him something, but he said it anyway. Tanya glared at him from the defense table, venom in her eyes, but he didn't flinch. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. When it was over, the judge thanked him for his honesty. Tanya's lawyer tried to twist it, tried to make him sound complicit. But the evidence was too strong, her signature too bold, her greed too plain. The verdict came 2 weeks later, guilty on all counts, 5 years in state prison, no parole for at least 3. The courtroom murmured as the judge read the sentence. Tanya's head snapped toward Marcus, fury burning in her face. You ruined me, she screamed as the guards pulled her away. Marcus didn't move. He just sat there, eyes glassy, hands clasped. When he finally looked at me, there was no anger left, just quiet acceptance. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us again. Someone shouted, Mrs. Davis, any words now that justice is served? I stopped at the steps, turned to the cameras and said, Justice isn't revenge. It's restoration. My son lost his way, but now he's finding it again. And that's all a mother can hope for. That night, Marcus came to see me once more, He looked lighter, even in his shame. "I don't deserve your love, Mama," he said. I shook my head. "You don't earn a mother's love, Marcus." "You remember it." He started crying again, the kind of crying that heals. I held him, my hands resting on his back, and whispered the same words I used to when he was little. "You're still my boy. You just took the long road home." It was a week after the verdict when I finally allowed myself to open the last box Tanya and Marcus had left behind. It sat untouched in my garage, brown cardboard, sealed with tape, labeled in Tanya's perfect handwriting, "Old papers." I almost threw it away. God knows I'd had enough of old papers, but something about that neat label bothered me. Tanya never organized anything unless it served her purpose. So I took a kitchen knife, sliced the tape and lifted the lid. Inside, I found files, receipts, and envelopes, some with my name, some with Marcus's. Most were harmless. But at the very bottom was a slim black folder. I pulled it out, and what I saw inside made my stomach twist. Letters, dozens of them, addressed to me. They were from my bank, my pension office, even from a law firm in Chicago. All of them unopened. The earliest one was dated over a year ago. I tore one open and started reading, and my heart dropped. "Dear Mrs. Davis, per your recent inquiry, the withdrawal request from your retirement account has been approved." My fingers trembled. Withdrawal request? I hadn't made any. Another letter confirmed a transfer. $60,000 withdrawn 6 months before Tanya forged the deed. Every page was proof that she'd been draining me long before she touched the house. And then, beneath those letters, I found a printed email chain between Tanya and a man named Robert Kane, an attorney in Chicago. She'd been trying to transfer what remained of my savings into a joint investment fund under their names. Her names, mine forged again, but the worst part wasn't the money. It was what else she'd planned. Attached to one email was a scanned document titled Power of Attorney, Medical Directive. I felt the air leave my lungs. It listed me as mentally unfit to manage my own care. It named Tanya as the sole decision-maker, with authority to place Evelyn Davis in a care facility at her discretion. If she'd gotten it approved, I would have been institutionalized, sedated, stripped of everything. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sank to the floor, the papers scattered around me like ash. My heart pounded, but my hands went cold. She hadn't just wanted my money. She'd wanted my silence. I picked up one of the documents and stared at my forged signature, shaky, unconvincing, but still mine in ink. My eyes blurred with tears. That's when I realized Tanya hadn't just tried to steal my life. She'd tried to rewrite it. That night, Marcus came by after work. He was living in a small rented apartment now, trying to start over. He looked tired but calmer than before. "I brought dinner," he said softly, holding up a bag of takeout. "Chinese, your favorite," I nodded. "Thank you." We ate quietly, listening to the rain tapping against the windows. It felt almost normal, almost. Then I said, "I found something, Marcus." He looked up. "What is it?" I slid the black folder across the table. "You need to see this." He opened it and started reading. His eyes widened. His breathing quickened. "Oh my God," he whispered. She planned to—" "Yes," I said. "She was going to have me declared incompetent." He slammed the folder shut and pushed it away like it burned him. "She told me it was just financial stuff, Mama, that she was organizing your accounts, helping manage your estate. I didn't know it went this far. I swear I didn't." I reached across the table and put my hand on his. "I know." His eyes filled with tears. "She could have ruined you." "She almost did," I said softly. But what she didn't count on was that the woman she underestimated would have proof strong enough to bury her twice. He swallowed hard. "You have to give this to the DA. I already called Rosa," I said. "She's sending a team in the morning. These documents seal it. Tanya won't be walking free after this." Marcus leaned back, shaking his head. "I can't believe I married someone capable of that." I studied him quietly. "People like Tanya don't just appear, Marcus. They look for cracks, insecurity, guilt, weakness. She saw yours and built a home inside it." He flinched. "So this is all my fault again?" "No," I said gently, "but it was your door she walked through." He looked down, then whispered, "I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're my son," I said firmly. "That hasn't changed, but maybe now you'll learn that blood doesn't make family. Character does," he nodded, tears glistening. "I want to fix things, Mama, however I can." "Then start by forgiving yourself," I said. "And when you're ready, help someone else who's where I was. That's how you pay it back." When he left that night, I stood by the window watching him walk to his car. The streetlight flickered, rain slicked the pavement, and for the first time in years, I felt peace stirring somewhere deep inside me. But later, as I gathered the papers to hand over to Rosa, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman staring back wasn't the same Evelyn Davis from a year ago. Her eyes weren't soft anymore. They were sharp, knowing, unafraid. There were lines around her mouth, yes, but they weren't from sadness. They were from strength earned the hard way, and for the first time, I didn't see a victim. "I saw a survivor," I whispered to my reflection. "You made it. You damn well made it." The next morning, Rosa's team arrived. They took the files, the emails, the directives. Rosa hugged me before leaving and said, "You've done more than reclaim your life, Evelyn. You've exposed something bigger, how easily women like you can be silenced." Her words stayed with me long after they left. Because she was right. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was every mother, every widow, every aging woman made to feel like she was in the way. And from that day on, I promised myself my story wouldn't end in that courtroom. It would begin there. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, a plain white envelope with my name written in Marcus's handwriting. The postmark said Atlanta Correctional Facility. My hands hesitated before opening it. After everything, I didn't know what to expect. A plea, an apology, maybe silence where words used to be, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a single page, folded neatly, and something small wrapped in tissue paper. A key. I set it down on the table and unfolded the letter. His handwriting was shaky, uneven, like he'd written it through tears. "Mama, I don't know if I have the right to call you that anymore, but I'm going to anyway, because I can't breathe without saying it. They sentenced me to 1 year of community custody for withholding evidence. I deserved worse. You were right. I looked away when I should have spoken. I told myself love meant silence. But now, every night, I hear your voice in my head, that calm strength that never shouted, never begged, never broke. I used to think you were just patient. Now I know you were powerful." When they took Tanya away, I felt relief and shame for feeling it. I realized I'd been living in her cage long before the handcuffs came. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was hiding behind her. "Mama, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know I'm trying to be the man you raised, the one you could be proud of again. The key is to my old room. I found it when I packed my things after the trial. I kept it all this time without knowing why. Maybe it's because that room was the last place I felt innocent. I'm giving it back to you now, hoping it still opens something between us. I'll understand if you never write back. Your son." Marcus, when I finished reading, I pressed the letter to my chest and let the tears come. Not the kind that sting, but the kind that wash. For years I'd prayed for this, not just justice, not even forgiveness, but understanding. The moment when he'd finally see the truth for himself. And here it was, written in ink and humility. I picked up the key and turned it in my palm. It was small, brass, with the number 2 etched faintly into its side. His childhood bedroom, the one with blue wallpaper and glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling. That room had seen everything. His first nightmares, his college acceptance letter, his laughter, his anger. And in a way, it had seen me too, every version of me that ever believed a mother's love could fix what the world breaks. I walked upstairs, my feet slow, deliberate. The air felt heavier the closer I got. When I reached the door, I stood there a long time before sliding the key into the lock. It turned easily, like it had been waiting. The smell hit me first, faint dust and old wood. The room was almost exactly how it had been years ago. The bed neatly made, the bookshelf half empty, the photo of him and me at his high school graduation still sitting on the dresser. I ran my fingers over the frame. In that picture, we were both smiling, genuinely, freely. He had his arm around me, and I looked like the proudest woman alive. I could still remember that day, the smell of the auditorium, the sound of his name being called, the way he looked back at me from the stage. He'd had no idea then how life would test him, how choices can turn love into weapon and guilt into chains. But as I stood there, I realized something else. Neither had I. I sat on the bed and looked around. Everything felt smaller, quieter, but full of memories that refused to die. I whispered into the empty room, "You can come home when you're ready, baby. The light will be waiting." That evening, I sat at my desk with a pen and a piece of stationery I'd been saving for years, thick ivory paper with gold trim. I wrote him back, "My dear Marcus, there's no prison strong enough to hold a man who finally sees himself clearly. You've already started walking free, and I can feel it in your words. I forgave you the moment you told the truth. Not because you asked for it, but because carrying anger would have chained me to the same pain you're learning to let go of. You were born into struggle, raised on sacrifice, and built from love. Don't let one storm convince you the sun forgot your name. This key you sent back, I'm keeping it safe. When you've rebuilt yourself, come home and take it again. Your room is still yours, always will be, with love that never expired." Mama, when I finished, I sealed the letter and set it by the window. The evening sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. The light hit that brass key and made it glow. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. A real smile, not the polite one I'd worn for years, but the kind that comes when your soul exhales. Because this wasn't the end of something broken. It was the start of something rebuilt. The next morning, I mailed the letter, and as I dropped it into the blue postal box, I whispered, "Let it reach him on a day he needs it most." When I came home, I hung the key on a small hook by the window. It caught the sunlight just right, glinting like a promise, a reminder that even when love falters, it can find its way home again. The evening sky was turning gold when I saw the headlights. At first, I thought it was a delivery truck, until I recognized that familiar hum. The same make, the same silver paint, the same dent above the right tire from the summer Marcus tried to teach Tanya how to park. My hand tightened around my teacup. The car rolled to a stop at the edge of the driveway. For a long moment, no one moved. The world outside was hushed. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. Then the driver's door opened, and Marcus stepped out. He wasn't in a suit this time. No more polished image or forced composure. Just jeans, a plain gray hoodie, and the face of a man who'd finally stopped running. He looked older than his years, but there was a calm in him I hadn't seen since he was a boy. I didn't move. I just sat by the window, watching him stand there under the porch light. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine through the glass. He didn't smile, didn't wave. He just stood there, rain-soaked and still, as if waiting for permission to exist again. For a heartbeat, I thought about letting him knock, about letting him wonder if forgiveness had an open door. But then I saw it. The faint glint of something in his hand. The letter I'd written him, creased, folded, read too many times. That did it. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it before he could lift his hand to knock. The porch light spilled over him like mercy itself. He blinked against it, uncertain. "Hey, Mama," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer with words. I just looked at him, really looked, and saw everything. The guilt, the growth, the boy beneath the wreckage. Then I stepped aside. "Come in, Marcus." He hesitated at the threshold like a child afraid to dirty clean floors. Finally, he stepped inside. The house was warm, smelling faintly of cinnamon and cedar. He looked around, his eyes landing on the hook by the window. The key still hung there, catching the light. "I got your letter," he said. "I know." He swallowed. "You said the room's still mine." "It is." We stood there for a long time, the silence thick but gentle, like rain after drought. Finally, I said, "You hungry?" His lips trembled into a small smile. "Always." So I went to the kitchen and pulled out what I'd made. Earlier, cornbread, collard greens, and the kind of roast chicken he used to beg for every Sunday. I hadn't cooked it for him specifically, but maybe, deep down, I had. He sat at the table quietly, hands folded, head bowed. When I placed the plate in front of him, he whispered, "Thank you." We didn't talk much as we ate. Some silences heal better than words ever could. After dinner, he walked upstairs without asking. I followed a few steps behind, slow, steady. He stopped at his old bedroom door. The key glimmered faintly against his fingers as he unlocked it. When the door opened, he froze. Everything was just as he'd left it. The blue walls, the shelf of old baseball trophies, even the photo of us on the dresser, smiling like time had never passed. He turned toward me, his voice breaking. "You kept it all." "Of course," I said. "I was keeping a place for you, even when I didn't think you'd ever come home." Tears welled in his eyes. He stepped forward and hugged me, not the quick, awkward kind. This one lingered, heavy, trembling, real. He whispered against my shoulder, "I'm so sorry, Mama." I closed my eyes. "I know, baby. I know." When we finally pulled apart, he looked around the room again. "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," I said softly. "But you need it. And sometimes, needing something is enough to start over." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "How did you forgive me?" I smiled, tired but honest. Because holding hate is like holding your breath. Eventually, it only hurts you. He laughed through the tears. "You always make it sound so simple." "It's not," I said. "But it's possible." We stood there for a moment, the house breathing around us, the walls that had seen pain, the floorboards that had carried every version of our lives. Finally, I turned to leave. "I'll leave the light on. You rest now." He called after me, "Mama?" I paused at the doorway. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled. "That's what mothers do, Marcus. We wait, not for apologies, but for return." That night I sat by the window again, just like in the letter. The key hung on the hook beside me, swaying softly in the evening breeze. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving everything glistening under the moonlight. Through the reflection in the glass, I could see Marcus's light come on upstairs, his old room. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, the house felt full again, not of noise or chaos, but of peace. The kind of peace that comes when the cycle breaks, when pain turns into understanding, when love finally learns to protect itself. I whispered into the night, "You once threw me out of your house, my son, but tonight, you came home to mine." And with that, I turned off the porch light, letting the glow from the window guide him instead. Because forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't about forgetting what someone did. It's about remembering who they used to be and believing that version can return.